Peyton, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. Huge shout out to our friend Jordan Barr for helping us get connected that way. For people who maybe don't know you as well as Jordan or maybe even Rain that way, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the amazing things that you've got going on in the sports world?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Long story short, I am Duke softball's very first verbal commit. So, my freshman year, Duke started a team. I committed to a vision that didn't exist yet. And 5 years later, fell in love with the weight room, became a top 10 program, ACC champion, All American, fulfilled every dream I had in college, went on to play professional softball for 3 years with Athletes Unlimited. And throughout that period, worked in the NIL and rev share industry with Teamworks, which is what I still do today.
That's absolutely incredible. I love that for you, Peyton. And as you mentioned, you were kind of part of that first cohort to go through Duke softball that way, literally setting the foundation for the program to what it is today that way. Walk me through that a little bit because that's kind of unique in the college athletic space. Most of the time, athletes come in and the program's established, it's been going on for a while. They know what they're getting themselves into. With this, it almost feels like you're literally walking into a blank space and you're gonna fill it with whatever you want to that way by the sounds.
Yeah, it's funny because at the very beginning of the program, our coaches made it a point to say that you're building the foundation. You might never reap the fruits of the tree that you are planting. So I always tell recruits coming in and other players that I've talked with, I got a really lucky chance to see both sides of the same coin. I lost 30 games as a sophomore and then turned around and won 40 games as a senior. Went to a super regional the very next year. So it was a really cool experience being on both sides of that. A lot of times players come into a culture that's already been established. They kind of have their own hierarchy between classes. And it was really cool to start from the ground up. It was not easy. I'd like to say we operated as a military team the first few years. We had a lot of young people. So to just come in and blindly trust the vision of our coach who led us to a super regional in just 4 or 5 years. So it was really cool, and I think that set the foundation coming in where, it really is the little things. It's starting with your foot behind the line and conditioning. It's sitting in the first few rows of class. It's tucking your shirt in. It's introducing yourself to your professors. All of that, if you can get people to buy into the little things, the chemistry just naturally comes on the field, and the skill level's there because you're at the D1 level at a company or at a program like Duke. So I just remember the first week I got on campus, Coach K met with us, and he said, you don't play for Duke, you are Duke. And once you get that in your mind, then you can really start to decide how you want to build yourself to be a championship team. So it was really fun, and then obviously not winning 30 game or winning not winning 30 games is not fun, but when you get the other side of that, it's kind of like it all pays off.
I think you nailed that, and I think it's one of those things where, as you mentioned, it's truly a blessing to be able to come in and literally lay the groundwork for what the program is going to become that way, and I think of that as a little bit of a obstacle or a challenge in a way, and that obstacle kind of becomes the path forward. It's like we don't have a how we always did things. We have to set the standard here, and the way I look at that, it's like, what better honor for a person to literally set the standard for the rest of the program. Every single athlete, every coach, every personnel, teammate, whatever you want to throw at it from a label standpoint that was involved, like set the foundation for what that is today. And I think it's absolutely incredible how so many of you are now involved in sports still. Rain is still involved in sports. You're still involved in sports, directly, indirectly, however you want to say it that way. And I think there's something to be said about that building from the ground up and now continuing to keep sport in your life, long term.
And it definitely there was a lot of pressure being tied to player 1 coming in and expecting to succeed right off the bat, so knowing how to manage that, I think, helped me a lot. Obviously, the highs always outweighed the lows, but the lows were pretty low at times, but coming out of college and having that experience absolutely translates into professional sports as a player, absolutely translates into the corporate world as someone working in sports, especially a women in sports, so just being able to take the competitive nature and build something from the ground up and work for a company in a space like NIL and revenue share that's still being molded and changing and morphing, I feel like a lot of that experience, well, as a player, might not seem like it would relate to the real world, but it absolutely has.
How did you manage the lows within sport that way? Because that's something that comes up quite a bit. Everyone talks about the highs, everyone talks about the incredible wins and the comebacks, but just like we talked about with rain a few weeks ago, sometimes you get the yips, sometimes things happen, they don't go your way. Academics get stressful, the travel within the ACC, which I love to call the All Coast Conference now, kind of starts to take its toll on you that way. Things get tough sometimes. And how did you as an athlete respond to those times when things got a little bit more challenging that way?
And mental health is something that has always been at the forefront as a player, even now as a retired professional athlete and what I do in my day to day. And I think the mental health struggles I faced as a freshman and sophomore, while very, very different than the mental health struggles I faced as a senior, they still were equally as important. And spent a lot of time in the sports psychologist's office, Greg Dale, who passed a few years ago with Duke, and some of the clinical psychologists. So having someone to sit in front of and be able to separate that to say, "Hey, I can be here to help you with your sports psychology needs, but at some point, some of this belongs with the clinical psychologist." So having I'd say, being to the point where you're like, I can be vulnerable enough to ask for help, I think that's the first step. And being at a school like Duke, I think a lot of the thought process was, I have absolutely every resource I need. I have some of the best coaching staffs in the world. I have some of the best nutritionists in the world, academic tutors, academic advisors, weight coaches. I have absolutely everything I need. Why am I still struggling? And I think coming out of high school, being a three-time state champion and going D1, everything feels like it came easy to me in high school. And then you get to college and you're kind of at square one again because everyone was a three-time state champion and did all of those things and accomplished all of those things in high school. So I think as a player and something my former sports psychologist Greg Dale always said that I always tried to keep in mind was, try to have some sort of separation. It doesn't matter what it is, even if it's you leave practice and you put on your street clothes. You're not an athlete anymore, you're a student. Things like that, where it's trying to take my head out of the game and say, instead of thinking about, man, if I walk this player, I'm going to have runners on first and second now. And now it's my job to keep them off. And more just trying to separate what do I need to do mechanically to get out of this situation. So, not everything is emotional, but I also love one of my former coaches, Jessica Bracamonte, said, "You can be sensitive and not soft." And I absolutely loved that because I'm like, I'm a very sensitive person, but that does not mean I am soft. So I think I took a lot of that into my fifth year. And obviously, academics got way harder as I went into my master's program. And so now I'm faced with a whole new set of problems. So it's okay. Maybe I reach out to my professors a little more and lead into the tutors that I've had access to a little more. So I think it's just realizing that if you do not sacrifice something, then your mental health is going to be the sacrifice. And they always say, like, pick three: good grades, a social life, and good on field performance. Athletes can never have 100% of all three. So trying to find the balance where I could. And I think isolating yourself is going to be what makes you kind of have the snowball into the pits of mental health struggles. So it's just realizing, but you don't realize that if you don't ask for help. And that looks like a lot of different things. So I think asking for help was the best thing I ever did. And yeah, I know everyone wants to face things independently and strongly, but I feel like the true leaders on a team are the ones who aren't scared to ask for help and lead by example that way too.
I love that ideology of sensitive but not soft. And I completely echo your point on not being afraid to ask for help that way because unfortunately, I've yet to meet someone that is the human equivalent of Superman. There's not one person that can do every single thing that way. There's always a limit. And even if you don't have a limit, there's always things that you might be better at than others, and some things that might take you a little bit longer. And you need to rely on others to kind of do their part. And that's something that I've especially learned in the business front is it can be very difficult to step back sometimes because everyone wants to just charge forward. And I think some of that comes from athletics in general. It's a very hyper stimulating environment. It's very exciting. It's very go, go, go. versus, stepping back. That usually means slowing down and pumping the brakes. And most of the time, people don't want to do that. Not in sport, not in business, not in life. People just want to charge forward. But I think personally, sometimes that step back actually allows you to kind of reassess, re-engage, and redirect moving forward that way. And I think the other element that you hit on too is that concept of balancing all the different things that way. And, James Clear, who I think is absolutely great, has that four burner theory where it's like, hey, you can't keep everything on at the same time. Something's got to give, maybe that's your family and, how often you call home and visit home in season. Maybe that's your relations with your friends, which, if they're on your team, that's kind of built in. Maybe it's, your work life and in season, you're not going to be working work study jobs or whatever as much that way. There's always something that's going to have to get turned down in order for the main thing to continue to be the main thing, unfortunately. And I think ultimately it comes back to what you said about acknowledging and understanding that, hey, we have to turn something down. We can't, unfortunately, run everything full speed ahead 24/7 because that's how that whole burnout thing happens. And that unfortunately impacts far more athletes than I think we'd like to admit sometimes.
Yeah, and I remember my 5th year, I said to the other 2 girls who were in my class, I'm like, "Man, I just think I'm, like, a little burnt out," and they were like, "It took you this long to burn out? We've been burnt out since sophomore year." So it's like trying to when you get to that point when you're a vet of the game and you might not need as many practice reps in your off days and you might prioritize rest and getting to the point where I think for me it was how can I simplify everything so that I can lean more into academics, like you said, maybe put my routine on the back burner because it comes so second nature to me. And as an athlete, trying to tell someone, put your routine or put what you're doing at practice on the back burner, a lot of people are gonna be like, absolutely not. But I mean, I think it was Indiana football's head coach saying, there are some days where I just don't need them to practice this hard. Like they already know what to do. They've run the drills already. And I know confidence comes from preparation, and so I think I got to a point in my 5th year where my coach and I had a really good relationship where I could go to her and say, "Hey, I'm having a really tough day. I don't think I need to throw today before the game tomorrow. I'll do what I need to do. I'll show up. If I don't show up, that's a different conversation, but I feel prepped enough." So having the trust goes both ways. Obviously, she could totally not trust me and be like, "No, you're going to throw a bullpen," but reaching that point, I think knowing confidence comes from preparation and knowing that if I do what I need to do and I can handle it on the field tomorrow, then, we just take next week as that comes too.
And you mentioned the importance of preparation as you were talking, and that's one of the areas that I feel like a great strength coach can really help and make all the difference for athletes that way. I think the term strength coach or strength and conditioning coach really doesn't encompass everything that these individuals do because a lot of the times, the ones that are truly remembered, the legends in the space, the guys and girls that athletes still remember and still talk about to this day. I don't care if we're talking about Jordan Barr, if we're talking about Rob Nelson, if we're talking about Nick Drano, or if we're talking about Joey or Coach P or Nicole or any of these other incredible strength coaches that way, Carl, right? Like all these great people, they do a little bit more than just help you get physically stronger. They do a little bit more than help you get into the best shape of your life that way. They travel with the team, there's bonding, there's all kinds of crazy things that they do that I feel like wasn't in the job description that way. What kind of impact did Jordan have on you and your team that way? And how has that been something that you've kind of carried with you to today?
Oh man, we don't have enough time to talk about all the things Jordan has done just for me personally and the team. But I mean, I feel like a strength coach is also like your therapist, your mental health guy. They're kind of all in one. And I feel like I was in a really unique spot because early in my career, I was solely more of just a closer. And so I didn't know that I was going to close every game. And it was one of my coach's roles that if you were not starting that game, you had to go in and lift on game day. It was kind of like your contribution to the team. And then when your number gets called, you're going to be prepared. And so I remember early in my career, whether I was going to go in and close or not, was kind of 50-50. So I would spend a lot of time in the weight room and then, I would get to the game that night and I would be throwing really hard and really well. And it would be like, man, I was lifting really heavy this morning. Like I threw on a game day and I'm still able to perform. And so as I progressed more into the starting role later in my career, Jordan and I kind of realized, this probably wouldn't be the case for a lot of athletes, but you pitch better when you lift on game days. And so I think it was like one day in my 5th year, I said something like, "Oh, I don't like my curve's a little off today. Like I PR'd on sumo deadlift this morning." And my coach is like, "You lifted this morning?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Jordan and I have been lifting on game days for the past 5 years." And so it was kind of like a weird scenario where you get really close with the strength coach and then they really find your strengths before you do and they tap into those. And Jordan was always asking for clips of film, always asking for things that might have been off and trying to replicate those things in the weight room so that he could directly help every pitcher's needs or every hitter's needs. But it even turned into, I was in the weight room with a few other girls more than anyone on the team at the end of this season. And right when everyone's telling you to kind of hit the brakes and rest and recover, trusting Jordan to just because I'm getting in a weight room 2 times more than I have team lifts, doesn't necessarily mean that's gonna correlate to being more tired at the game or, like, not getting enough sleep, and he was just really someone that you could go to, and the weight room was an escape, it really was, and so it made you wanna go in and lift extra, and even if it was, like, me coming in after an all-nighter being like, "I'm ready to show up, I'm ready to be here," and Jordan being like, "You look like you got 2 hours of sleep, you're not lifting today." Like, someone needs to also tell you those things as well, or we always joke around in the weight room because 'cause we'd be like, "Oh, like, that guy's really cute," and from the corner, Jordan's like, "Nope, you don't need it, like, you don't need any distractions," or whatever it is, and Jordan was just really kind of a rock, and, when you weren't having a good game or even if you did have a good game, like, the weight room was always gonna be there in whatever capacity he needed, and he came on the road with us, and even after now that we're alumni, just reaching out to him and now going into the running sphere, long distance running, it's crazy because I never thought I would ask him for cross country's lifts, and so now he's helping me with those workouts, so truly is someone that you can rely on in and out of softball, and the weight room really was an escape, whether it was 6 a.m., noon, or 6 p.m. He was just always there, and I know it's really hard to show up every single day, especially that early, but he never took a day off. Like, even if we were all dead to the world and we just did not wanna be there, he changed that energy shift so fast, and it's like, "We wanna be here because we wanna show up for you," and I think that is really, really hard to do, especially with a team like baseball or softball who plays 60 games a season, and it's like, you are just looking to the next game. The weight room is just like a thing you wanna check off on your to-do list, but for us, it was like something we looked forward to. So I think that's a really hard environment to create, especially being with a group of women for 5 years, and they still have the same sentiment. So not enough time to say how much we love J Bar.
No, that's absolutely incredible, and I love to hear that that was your experience there, the culture, the environment that was created. I think that's ultimately the goal of every good strength coach is to have that kind of interaction with their athletes, and not just one that helps in the moment, but one that continues to have an impact years down the line that way. For people listening who don't know, why were you hitting up Jordan for those, cross country workouts?
I always say, now that I'm burnt out of softball officially, I retired my professional career, I was trying to find something that can mentally stimulate me as much as being on the mound in the bottom of the 7th inning with 2 outs, bases loaded, full count would, and I have found that marathon running actually tends to do the same. So it's really me against me, and obviously, as I tap into a new hobby, I'm overly passionate and extreme about everything that I'm doing, so wanting to still have the same lifting routine, obviously now coming out of softball, not having to hurl a softball anymore, and now more training like my knees and my calves and my lower body in that aspect. Might have asked Jordan for the Duke's cross country workout and Jordan being like, "Try to pair your long runs with your heavier lifts." And I'm like, "I'm not there yet, but maybe one day I will be at the stamina level of cross country." And I'm a very, very slow runner, but always rely on Jordan for anything physical, and all the alumni always joke because 'cause we're like, "We want Pilates bodies, bodies by J Bar." He's like, "Okay, then do Pilates." And we're like, "No, no, no, but, like, in the weight room." He's like, You're gonna have to do Pilates for that." So, everything that we do, it trying to, find a way to incorporate Jordan, even if it's, like, I know some of our alumni are doing Hard Rocks now, and some of our alumni have picked up golf. So I think we all still just find an excuse to reach out to J Bar and get a lift or get some golf tips or whatever it may be, or just some life advice. Because now that he has 2 kids, we're like, "All right, you're probably a little wiser now that we have left college. You can give us some life advice."
I feel like as part of the involving J Bar and everything, I feel like he should come with you all to Pilates,
That
actually, and I think that could be a great TikTok series, actually. I
Yes,
think you'd
exactly.
enjoy it. I think I think that'd be great carryover. It might even improve his golf game, which I will admittedly say is far better than mine. I lose more golf balls than it's worth, so I just don't go to the course that much because it's very expensive for me, not just for the fees, but I lose at least $30 of golf balls every time, but who knows? Maybe Pilates is the secret here.
Yeah, Jordan is a great golfer, and he never failed to tell us, but we always knew I feel like golf was secretly his favorite team, even though he told us we were his favorite team, but, I mean, he'll do anything that we ask him to try. Like, one day we were like, "Man, you made our run test, and it's really, really hard," and he's like, "I'll do the run test, just give me a day," and we're like, "Okay, shoot, I think he's serious about this," and of course, we watch him pass with flying colors with the most perfect running form I've ever seen. So we're like, "Okay, he can actually back up what he says he's gonna do."
I love that. There's something to be said about walking the walk, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that can dish it out, but not everyone can take it themselves. So there's truly something to be said about that. And I think that goes back to what we talked about before around culture and character that way, being someone that is willing to literally jump in the trenches with the athletes that way. There's something really, really powerful about that. And one of the other things that I think you mentioned early on that is really unique to you, Peyton, is you played softball beyond college. There's not a huge professional softball scene yet. And I
Yeah.
would love for that to change because I love watching the sport. It's extremely fast paced, it's engaging, and anything can happen at any time. What might be a routine ground out to the shortstop in baseball could literally turn into a base hit in softball because you just beat it out, right? Anything can happen at any time. And the pitching motion, because you were a pitcher, always amazed me. Like, I don't know how in the heck it's beyond me. It's truly impressive to watch that way. What was your professional softball career like? Because we don't talk with a whole lot of athletes on the podcast who played professionally in softball.
Yeah, it really made me fall in love with the game again. I was pretty burnt out coming out of my 5th year in college, and my career ended at UCLA on a super regional game on game 2. And I already had a job lined up. I was ready to start working, and my manager at the time was like, "Didn't you get drafted to a professional league? Aren't there only, like, 13 draftees in the country?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm just, like, ready to start working, I've been going at this for a long time." And my manager was like, "If you do not go play, like, I will not allow that. Like, we will find a way to let you do both." And so my first manager at Teamworks was really the reason that I was like, "Okay, maybe I should reconsider this." And so I took a long needed break, was dealing with some weird nagging pain that I thought I was like, maybe this is my time to step away." And so took a long break after being the ace all of my 5th year and throwing a lot of innings, and kinda got with Jordan again the year I lived in Durham just to stay consistent with lifting, which was great. Another reason why I thought, "Hey, this is a great avenue that I can easily transition into," and like you said, pro softball it's growing. It's not nearly as big as the MLB, obviously, but having the financial backing from the MLB, I think will really help us soar to that. And it's growing a lot, and again, like, starting something, I felt like I was a part of something that was still in its first few years, and not having as many teams, only having 4 teams in the league, I was truly facing hitters that were on the Olympic teams, hitters that I watched growing up in middle school and high school, which was surreal. I think I had a lot of imposter syndrome at first coming in, and one of the first batters I ever faced in pro was Haley McClenny from Alabama, and I'm like, "Oh my god, not to age you, but I remember watching you when I was in 8th grade in the Women's College World Series." Like, I have to keep telling myself I belong here because I'm an All-American and I got drafted, but they were just so amazing, and they wanna grow the game as well. the Amanda Lorenzes of the world and, the Haley McClenneys of the world. Danielle O'Toole took me under her wing as a vet pitcher right before she retired. Amanda Chittister, who was one of the first assistant coaches at Duke, gets to be my captain when I enter the pro space, and so you love to see other women lift women up in that space, and I think that's the key to growth, but I had a lot more freedom, which was a little weird at first. I got to kinda decide how I wanted to practice and lift, and Jordan was a really big part of that, but I truly fell in love with the game, and I got to really dig into my craft how I wanted to, and it was just such a cool way to go out. A lot of people end their college careers on a loss. You're lucky if you end your college career on a win. So I remember I ended my career, and then the decision to jump into pro was probably one of the best decisions I made just because I had never felt so empowered and confident in the game of softball and loved it something so much that I felt so good leaving it when I did. And now having an entirely new network of professional athletes and seeing the game grow and then seeing some other Duke players also enter the same league. It's been really, really cool to be on the other side. I will say, I had my first summer without softball this past year after retiring, and I finally understand after 20 years of playing softball why people love summer so much because I never got like a true summer, like out on the boat in the water at the beach, not having any softball obligations ever. So I loved it. Do I miss it? Not as much as I thought I would. But it was truly the best experience ever, and having something in the corporate world to do at the same time and go into when I was done just made the transition so much easier. So I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but, playing pro opened my eyes up to, like, a brand new aspect of softball I never thought I'd see, and I'm really grateful for that.
As you mentioned, you got to brush toes with some of the legends within the sport that way, in addition to having a positive influence on the next generation, whether that's stuff that you knew about and seeing other Duke athletes follow your footsteps. Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna brag about you for a second. You were the first All-American pitcher in Duke's history, I think. So, there's something incredible about that, and obviously, you mentioned all the direct things that you did, but also just thinking about the indirects, right? When you've got those games that are televised and, I flip them on every now and then when I see them come on ESPN Plus that way, and it's like, you never know who's watching that, right? You never know who in the next generation is literally watching you and saying, "You know what? I wanna be just like her when I play softball in college in 10 years," right? There's something really, really influential about that. And I think it's incredible that you got that experience. And I think it's incredible that it was so impactful for you and so many others. And I just cannot wait to see that grow and become amplified and increase exponentially here with some of the changes that are coming. I'm super, super excited about where the sport of softball is heading that way. In addition to the professional career, you mentioned about the corporate side a little bit, and it's funny because I see so many athletes transition into either corporate world or business entrepreneurship or sales. Like, there's something to be said about going from athlete to either really competitive business world or staying in sports. I have yet to meet an athlete that's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go and pick up a 9 to 5 and get comfortable. I mean, maybe they're out there, but that doesn't seem to go along with everything that you've learned from sport and athletics the majority of the time, I feel. So, I'd love to hear about your transition from sport into kinda corporate work world that way, because I'd imagine some of the things we discussed already, from travel to relations and so on that way, carry over into your work quite well.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was I feel like I was back in college some summers trying to balance, going from early morning weight session to morning meetings to practice, back to afternoon meetings, back to dinner and recovery, so a little of the schedule I felt like got busier and busier every year as I advanced up the corporate ladder and then continued on with my professional career. And at some point, something had to give. So I was like, man, I really love my corporate career and I think I'm ready to hang up the cleats. So it was an easy transition, but for, the 8 weeks of season, doing both of those at the same time was a little bit taxing, but how lucky am I to be overworked for a dream that I wish to have and the stress that I put on myself. This is what the life I chose and the life I wanted. I can't complain about it now, but really the transition with how NIL started and has morphed into revenue share, primarily going from schools to the football and basketball programs. I think just being on campuses and automatically having a softball connect everywhere I go has been huge. I think the league, Athletes Unlimited, signing on to use the products for brand viewership and partnership with the company I work with, getting to be a part of that was really, really cool. So I think just having the perspective of being an athlete who was at a powerhouse like Duke, who also did a year of NIL when in my last year, gave me a lot of perspective and a lot of leverage. But now being an athlete who has almost 4 years of the corporate NIL and revenue share partnership industry under her belt has just been really cool going to different campuses. And now that revenue shares in play, getting to meet with a lot of football teams and basketball teams, it's just really cool to watch March Madness and be like, "Man, I worked with that player last week. They're great, that coach was great, that AD is great," and getting to see how these schools are also looking to me to now formalize their revenue share plans and their NIL plans. It's been really cool now being able to say, and some days I kinda catch myself, being like, "Hey, my background, I was a former professional athlete," and it's like, man, that's so weird to say now 'cause it's I still get a little bit of imposter syndrome, but it's funny 'cause, in the corporate world, everyone's like, "Man, professional athlete, that is so cool," and then coming back to my teammates to practice after getting off a call, they're like, "Man, that's so cool you're established in the corporate world." So it was kind of like best of both worlds, and a lot of my teammates, as they were also transitioning out of sport, looking to me to say, "What can I do to get in the corporate space?" So it almost felt like, man, I might not be an Olympian, but, like, they really value my experience in the corporate space. So just knowing that doing both of those, while it was not easy and it was really stressful, I come out of that with such an amazing experience, and I'm so glad I did both. And shout out to my manager who really thought that, "You have 40 years for the rest of your life to work, if you have the opportunity to play professionally, absolutely take it." And being in a league that is new and upcoming, I'm gonna have kids one day, and I'm gonna look back, and I'm gonna be like, "Man, I was a part of the beginning of that." And I'm so glad that I did it when it was in its infancy, because it's gonna be really cool to look back on. And I think similar to that, like being player 1 at Duke, when I was at Duke, I almost saw it as a little bit of a burden because of the pressure and the expectations that came with it. And so now being 4 years removed from college, it's really cool to look back retroactively and be like, "I was player 1, not I am player 1." So it's just been really cool to have the retroactive experience. And I saw a quote the other day that was like, "Man, like, how lucky are we to have nostalgia about our own memories?" And I was like, "Yeah," like, I find myself missing the nostalgia, and everyone gets that when it comes to, like, postseason of the sport they play, like watching the Women's College World Series and stuff. But I think I have nostalgia about, like, the really little things. Like, man, I also used to think, like, everyone thinks I'm gonna strike out everyone because 'cause I'm player 1, or, I'm coming out of a really stressful corporate meeting, and now I have to go throw in this professional game against these Olympians, like, this is so stressful. So I think it's been really cool to have the retroactive experience, which is something that, life is experienced backwards. It's, really hard to be present, and you don't really know you're in the good days when you're in them, which sounds so cliche, but it's so, so true, and I'm now living that experience fully.
You said that so eloquently, Peyton. For people listening, what was your favorite memory from your softball career? Because it sounds like it was just so influential on who you are today.
It really was. And I mean, I we won the ACC championship as 4 years into being a team, and I think a lot of my teammates would say that. But there was a memory, it was like a week before our season got canceled because of COVID. We went from losing 28 games, 29 games my sophomore year, to going into my junior year with an entirely new staff except for my head coach, and we were, like, 24-3. It was the most insane start to any season we'd ever had. And we traveled down to Texas to play the University of Texas, and they were undefeated at the time. They were number 4 team in the country, and we were just so delusional about, we deserve to be here and we are good, that we beat Texas 1-0. I threw the entire game, and I have just the most vivid memory of the last out. And I remember the whole game, I'm like, these girls are twice our size. They are running faster than us. They're hitting the ball so hard. Was just kind of waiting for the floodgates to open the whole game. And then as the game went on, I kind of started to build up confidence. Like, I am shoving it against the number 4 team in the country right now. And I remember it was bottom of the 7th inning, 2 outs. They had a runner on first, and they had their best hitter up, and I threw a curveball for a strike, and the runner took off. Our catcher threw it over my head. We tagged the runner out, game over, and I just remember everyone on the bench and everyone on the field running off to pretty much celebrate like we had just won the national championship because we just beat Texas 1-0. And obviously our season got canceled shortly after that, but that was like the turning point of Duke softball as a program. I think after that, it was like my coach saying, "Has it hit you guys yet that you are good and you deserve to be here?" And I remember we got our first top 25 ranking after that, and we never looked back and played against a few Texas girls in the pro league, and they're like, "Man, you're never gonna let us live that loss down, are you?" And I'm like, "We're a new team, give us a break," we had to hang on to everything we got, so I think that sole game was, like, the turning point for our whole program, and being like an established program now, you see Duke get upset by an unranked team, and you just have to tip off your hat to them because I used to be there. I know the girls at Duke now have never experienced not making the ACC tournament or the NCAA tournament and losing almost 30 games. So it's like whenever I see them get upset, I'm like, yeah, like we used to be the other team. I feel that. So that was probably one of my favorite memories of just being like, "Man, everything makes sense now." Like, what I'm doing in the weight room, what I'm doing at practice, like, it is showing up against the best hitters in the country, and I can be right there with you. So, that was the point where I was like, "I'm taking my best versus your best. I'm not pitching to your weaknesses. I wanna beat your best pitch with my best pitch." So, that's where, like, my confidence, I think, really, really came from, and that all starts well before season starts, obviously.
There's something to be said about that, putting your best against someone else's and then coming out on top. That is absolutely incredible, and I've loved hearing all about your journey within softball, Peyton, and the impact that it's had on you today and all the people that have had an influence on you along the way that way. You're truly incredible, and I'm sure people listening are gonna have questions, and they wanna follow along with your journey and keep up with all the incredible things that you do on the day to day. Where can they find you at online and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I try to say I'm trying to keep up my obligations as a micro influencer on Instagram, so trying to post everything I can about my new hobbies in marathon running, which sounds crazy, but I've really dove into that and really tapping into health and wellness and mental health is still at the forefront of what I try to portray on my platform because I know I had such a big voice when I was an athlete, so I want to continue that. So I'd say most of my day to day is going to be on my Instagram at Peyton St. George. Try to be as authentic as I was in college and still be overly passionate and extreme about the things that I now do going into my mid and late 20s, which is running as it turns out. So I think a lot of former athletes have probably also geared towards running because they are realizing it really is you versus you and you can't really find anything that replicates that you had in college. So I think a lot of former athletes you're gonna find are start to turn into runners and high rocks and CrossFit and find any way that they can compete with themselves. So if anyone wants to follow along or, tap into my day to day in the corporate world and my campus visits with revenue share and NIL, that's definitely the best place to follow me and find me.
Absolutely. We'll link to that in the description below too. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and keep up to date with everything that Peyton is up to. Is there anything we missed as we were chatting today, Peyton? Or
I don't think so. I mean, I think we got to give J Bar another shout out. I was actually texting him the other day. We're trying to plan a Duke softball alumni weekend, and I'm like, hey, who do I got to talk to get on the driving range? Trying to get him to come out and join us and mess around like old times. So he'll probably show us a few things about his golf game. He never ceases to miss that opportunity, but we always gotta hype him up, in the weight room and his golf swing. And I think he secretly loved softball because he could do a lot of the same lifts that the golfers would do. So I think it gave him an excuse to get a few more golf swings in there in the weight room.
Oh my goodness, and of course, reformer Pilates will make an appearance that weekend as
Yeah,
well for tea.
eventually.
I can't wait. I can't wait to hear all about that.
For abs and Pilates bodies, he's like, "You just have to do Pilates." I'm like, "I don't wanna do Pilates though."
Peyton, this has been absolutely incredible. I really appreciate your time and everything you shared with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, and shout out to Jordan Barr over at Duke University Weight Room.